The Jill and Stacy Show with Jacob Saltzman.
That's all. As superintendent, that's all I would ask. Just make me aware.
Yeah.
Those types of things.
And
certainly would
engage.
encourage it and support it however we can.
Right.
Engage your board members.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing
Yeah.
too.
That's the other
Engage
thing,
us
yeah.
to participate with them, because sometimes that because we already know them on some level, and it helps because they can have a pretty blunt conversation with us. So, or they might not with you.
Right.
So.
I know Mrs. Proctor has already been to Cooper and New Haven, and what I've heard, great visits from both principals, so
Yeah.
great visits with them.
She really enjoyed Cooper.
Mm-hmm.
She talked about it at the meeting.
Yeah, right.
Where did it say she went?
Would that be something then formally?
She went to New Haven and Cooper. I thought New Haven was the one where they canceled the meeting and didn't bother to tell her.
Yeah, it was one of those.
But I feel like the public should know.
That sounds like New Haven, but I'm not sure it was. I mean, that principal there is extremely rude.
We recommend principals to do alongside of their board member if it's in their
I
district.
think that might be a good practice, because I think board members need to have a better relationship within the schools too. So maybe if they're inviting the representative, they invite both. That's what I think. So we're getting the same experience. So if they ever call us and we're not there, we can't tell them.
And it's relationship building.
Yeah.
Other thoughts, other reflections?
I know I'm not supposed to talk, but you might want to know what was reported to me relative to that meeting. Well, I'll just tell you the main issues that was reported. Senator Schickel was discipline and inappropriate content being taught in schools. Mary Ann Proctor, RFID cards and use standard goals of only 40% proficient. So, and Steve Robbins was panorama, and Jay Williams was school choice in the context of diversity and schooling options to include classical education. I think I heard you say you got that, or one of you at least understood that. So that's what reported to me.
And I think Senator Schickel did say, like, both the people that I hear from and the people that are most upset, right? Like, and I think that issue is easy to overcome. I don't know inappropriate curriculum, but our curriculum is all public. They can see it, so I think that's pretty transparent. That's an easy, place to find common ground. I don't know that
Put on the brakes.
That's sus.
Curriculum is not transparent. Parents do not see it. It's on a Chromebook. It's assigned to them. We do not see that. And if you go to the district's website, it just tells you what programs are used, does not give you the actual curriculum. And it just gives you a basic standard, like a template of what is being taught in each class, but there's no details.
And that's all they show on curriculum night also. So, they'll say, oh, well, it is. We have curriculum night. We open up the district for parents. Well, one, they don't communicate that very well, just like they don't communicate anything in our district well at all. If it's of any importance, committee meetings or anything like that, they hide it so far on the backside of the website, you can't even find it. I had to call the district office to find it. So they'll say, oh, well, it is transparent because we have these curriculum nights. But like you said, they give you a very basic shell of what the curriculum is. And from there, you have to figure everything else out.
Well, what Schickel was talking about in the meeting was the video that was shown at Connor Middle School several years ago.
Why does everyone deserve to feel comfortable being themselves? Well, you only have one life to live, and it's important to make sure that it's yours. I know so many people that are unhappy because they're so busy trying to please others, and you have to please yourself first. It's important to know yourself and learn yourself, and it's a process. And there are people who are in their 50s that still don't know themselves, and there are people who are 17 that do know themselves. It's a process, it's a learning process, and it won't happen overnight. But I think that it's so important to learn yourself. I always tell people it's the difference in knowing that you're gay and accepting that you're gay. It wasn't until I accepted that I was gay that I was able to really be myself. Once my sister outed me and I finally made the decision to just be who I am, I was able to let go of others' expectations. I was able to let go of others' idea of who I was supposed to be, and I was able to look in the mirror and really see myself and learn myself and understand what makes me happy, what makes me flourish. And it's important to do. Everyone is unique and special, and so for that reason, everyone deserves to feel comfortable being themselves. Everyone makes mistakes and like things that others don't like, and so for that reason, they have the right to not feel judged or to not feel like others are disapproving or not accepting of who they are. There are times that I step out in the world and I defy stereotypes and I defy people's expectations of me, but the one thing that keeps me going at all times is I know myself. I love myself. I'm comfortable with myself. So no one's opinion, no one's idea of what I should be doing impacts me, because I'm worried about what I want to do, because I'm worried about being comfortable in my own skin. So I challenge you to look to your neighbor or your peer and tell them one thing that you're comfortable with about yourself, and vice versa. I want you guys to share and kind of talk about why it's important to be comfortable with what you're comfortable about, and how admirable it is to even be able to acknowledge how comfortable you may be with yourself or with something that others may not be comfortable with about yourself. And if you're by yourself right now, I want you to just take a second and reflect and think about 2 things that you're comfortable with about yourself, that make you happy when you think about yourself, that you know you're good at. I want you to think about those things.
Shika was appalled. I was appalled because it was shown to my child. The next day, the video disappeared. It wasn't available anymore on that platform. And the principal supported every liberal agenda that these teachers were rolling out. That's the agenda that's coming from Kentucky. That's what Turner's pushing. Parents aren't aware of it. Like Stacy said, it's all on a Chromebook, so you don't see what's happening until you actually have the Chromebook in your hand and sitting in front of it. You're not going to know, because they're not sharing everything with you. They are not transparent. So
that goes back to when they were using Summit personalized learning. Only a handful of parents had gotten into their children's Chromebook and actually looked through the curriculum pieces. And you had to log in your child's login information. They had a parent portal. The parent portal didn't show you the actual curriculum. And in the 7th grade history section, there was an entire chapter teaching Islam, and it was an imam teaching Islam, and they had to answer questions about the Quran and the Sunnah and Muslim beliefs before they could pass that chapter. And there was a coinciding chapter that talked about Christianity was a superstitious religion, had a picture of Jesus whipping people out of a church and saying that the fall of all empires was because of Christianity and the rise and success of empires was all because of Islam. And most people don't know, but 3 parents did sign up on a lawsuit with the ACLJ and threatened a lawsuit against the Boone County Schools for indoctrination because of that particular curriculum that they were using. And most parents had no idea what was on there. I asked parents all that year, is your child doing Summit? Are they on a Chromebook? And a lot of parents didn't even know if their child was enrolled in this program.
You know, from the outside, it's just hard to convince some of the there's just some places we're just not going to connect. You know, I think we all stand by as educators why we want the program, but that's all right to have differences in agreement. School choice, that, you know, being not privatized education, well, we already have some of that, like in our district already, where we have the ATC program, we have Ignite, we have the virtual school. We have early college. We have, you know, some school choice already. I don't know what the classical education piece, but you know, that's something we can look at certainly, I guess. or to show him how our curriculum, our AP curriculum at our schools is definitely more of a classic curriculum that works well for a lot of our students. You know?
Yeah, I think if you do more about those options and some of the higher level work.
Well, and I think
it's
if
easier.
Mr. Parks' idea that he brought up at the last board meeting with alternative schools, that council type thing, would be beneficial because we could expand on what we have based off of some of these ideas. So. And just make that part.
I like how he says he doesn't know what he means by classical education, but then he claims we have it. Okay.
Other input?
Next time we have one of those, can we get a little bit more buy-in as board members? We were put front and center in that, and we really didn't have our hands on that too terribly much. And that made it a little awkward. I would say more than a little awkward. But if you're gonna put us front and center, we've got to be prepared, and we've got to know everything that we're walking into, and we need to know for certain that they're prepared and knowing everything that they're walking into.
And no agreement is made.
No, that's what I was getting ready to say. He never responds to her. And what she's asking is valid. She's literally just asking, if you're going to have a meeting like this, it's better for you to give the legislators and give the school board members. Remember, they're the only participants of the meeting. The school board members and the legislators. She's just asking for you to give them the information up front, which any leader that knows what they're doing would go, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Actually, any leader that knows what they're doing would have met with everybody individually probably and said, hey, here's what's going to happen. Where do you stand on this? Can we have some good conversations about it? And then you're not paying $1,000 for a moderator to come in and moderate a meeting. I mean, then you don't have to do that. And so once again, what she's asking, he's probably mad about it because he doesn't respond. I don't see why it's a big deal. I think they have every right to know what they're walking into.
I'm sure she got her hand slapped after that meeting for bringing it up in front of everybody. That's what he likes to do.
Yeah, oh, I'm sure he did.
But kudos to Carolyn. I give it to her for speaking up. He blindsided everybody.
Except for Karen Bird. And I'm sure Maria Brown knew, but everybody else was blindsided. And once again, this goes back to you have a school board who knows nothing about the meeting that they're walking into. Like that to me is they should all be on the same page. Even if you're going to blindside the legislative, team that was there, which I don't think you should, but even if you are, don't you think you should want your entire team on the same page?
You would think. Well, it goes back to leadership. He's not a leader. He's a dictator.
Yep, that's exactly right.
That's going to be a challenge because in the conversations right now, all the meetings I was scheduling Steve Rawlings for this visit coming up to one of our schools, and he was navigating his schedule right now with all the different committee meetings, all the different things going on in Frankfurt. As we get into December, it'll get even busier with all the preparations for the legislative session. And then once the session begins, so holding something like that between now and then just would not be a possibility, would not be feasible because of the schedule.
See how he sidestepped her actual request.
Mm-hmm. He does that all the time.
Via email, via telephone, via visits to our schools, those types of things we can certainly continue to try to do.
We just have to make friends. That's what we have to do. We have to make friends, and we have to find things that we can work on.
I would add to that it's unfortunate that a lot of information is somewhat politicized and weaponized, and that starts to warp people's view of what really happens in public education. And I know before I was on this board, I had preconceived notions of what happened around the district. And it took someone telling me and showing me what was actually happening for me to understand the parent group rumors and the PTA rumors and all the things that happen, weren't actually that way. And in today's sort of unfortunate, politicization, and none of it really serves any real purpose when it comes to public education, because you folks' job is pretty straightforward. Student comes in, student comes out better and educated, And
Hopefully.
so I would just make sure we all, not just you, but myself included, correct the inaccuracies when you can. And you don't have to make it a confrontational thing. Just we heard several things in that roundtable that were just outright incorrect. Not a fact that you could say one way or the other, or a statistic that you could put a slant on or anything, but just outright incorrect things. And
Does anybody know what he's talking about that was just outright incorrect?
I was trying to figure out the same thing. I don't know if he's referring to the 40% that was discussed.
Just so they know that 40% is being talked about all across the state, not just in Boone County. So
Right.
that's not incorrect information.
Well, he said you can't put a fact or stamp it as a fact. He said something to that regard. So he's talking about something's incorrect, but you can't put facts to it. And I'm like, what?
Well, that's what I just don't know is what is he saying? Because maybe there was something that was said that was incorrect, but what was it? So once again, we're using these broad generalization statements of a lot of things were said that were incorrect. Well, they only talked about certain things. I think when Randy got up and talked, he listed maybe 6 different things. Chipping of students, that's not incorrect. The test scores were not incorrect. I mean, that it is what it is. School choice, it sounds like they kind of agreed with what Jay Williams, maybe he means with, the 5th grade classroom, one school classroom. But the bottom line is, if we go back to like what we talked about in the first podcast, it actually is true. Kids were learning more back then. And so that is true. So that's where he makes these statements. What are you even talking about? You give us the facts of what was said that was incorrect and we'll listen. But until then, you can't make just a swooping generalization of, oh, these facts were wrong.
out, whenever you can. And it's difficult to do because, like you said, you want to make friends, and sometimes people don't
It's
like
hard.
to hear it.
Yeah.
And there's a difference between a political belief or an ideology and an absolute inaccuracy or wrong. And we need to not be afraid to point those out when we have to, just to make sure that we're conveying the correct information and not playing this game with hurling. Well, and not that, just political footballs back and forth, because there's a reality to the situation that we find ourselves in Boone County. This is one of the best school districts in the state of Kentucky by almost any measure. That being said, there are some pretty poor performing school districts. So you can see how a body of legislators would want to make some changes to address what they see are deficiencies in other parts of the state. Those deficiencies, when they apply their correction to them, might do well for those counties. For us, not so much.
What's interesting to me is if we were to ask Jesse, what's the fix to that? Well, us three probably know the fix to state legislators not having to go in and make rules. We would say to get rid of what statewide? Stacy, you always talk about this. What do we need to get rid of? KDE. And that is it. What he's talking about is getting rid of KDE. He would never say that that's what we need to do. But the only way to allow districts to do what they want to do and the state not come in and fix, fix low performing districts and then it affect all the districts is by getting rid of KDE, where we allow our districts to do what they feel is best for our districts. But, that's what he's saying, but he would never admit that that's what we need to do because he likes for the state to give us objectives and give us demands and then us do them.
Doesn't really work in a rural area. There's no one that wants to start a for-profit school in a mountainous area, for example, so that it doesn't work. What works for them might not work for us and vice versa. And so it's important to point those types of things out. And like the preschool thing where it came up where there's a misnomer that preschool was about babysitting. Like I paid for my daughter when she was that age. And public preschool is not that. It's school and it's learning. And currently only for children that are below the poverty level or have a learning situation, right? And I think even parents, I know I didn't know that when Karen was 3 years old. I didn't know that about preschool, public preschool. I just thought if you paid more money, you got the better school, right? And in Boone County, that's kind of the way some people, including myself, operated at that time. But if we had the conversation about what our idea of preschool, and I think Matt and I share that vision, would look like for all parents. You wouldn't have to pay a Little Red Schoolhouse, to send your child there. You can hopefully pay less and send your child to a school, not just a fancy babysitter with numbers on the walls. And so I think some of those conversations are just about, trying to make sure that people understand what we're actually talking about.
Well,
because I can tell you, and you guys were alluding to it, I read this a few minutes ago, and there's some things on here I don't really understand.
Yeah, I think that's important, definitely.
And I've been hanging out with you folks for 3 years. And so, increased private-public partnerships for early childhood learning. If they ask me what that looked like, me specifically, I don't know that I would know how to explain it. I would probably defer or say some really super cool political stuff to get, and it would come across as I really know what I'm talking about, but I said nothing. And that's
talking a circle and
right.
a hand movement.
So when I would imagine that there's a second grade teacher or a football coach or a custodian somewhere that or a bus driver, if they read this, they might get pretty much the gist of, but like, for example, invest in School Safety and Resilience Act. It doesn't really, we know what that means. Please give us the funds to hire the police to protect the school. But when you read that, it doesn't really apply to what we're actually trying to get. Because we already have the School Resiliency and Safety Act. It's a super unfunded mandate that costs the county, our district, a whole bunch of money. And while at the same time the taxpayer is already paying for the police department. And so, we need to make sure that when we send this out, or we have these conversations, and the building principals do invite whoever into their building, that they do have at least some idea of what these goals actually mean.
I wonder if people realize this, and I think this is good for people to understand. In all of these conversations that they've had about this, even with the police department and the sheriff's department and the SROs, I don't think most people know the sheriff's department out of their own budget already pays for over half of the SROs in Boone County. So they pay for over half. So now what the school district is saying, and I'm not saying I disagree with it. I'm not saying, I really don't know where I stand on this. What they're wanting to do is for the state to pick up the other half. And since it's mandated that you have these SROs in schools now, they're saying, well, since you're mandating it, then we want you to pick up the other half of it. the state mandates all kinds of things on our schools and they don't give us money for it. But for this specific thing, they want. And it's like we're not smart enough to understand if we take money from the state at that point to help pay for the SROs, what does that mean?
Exactly. What strings are attached?
What strings are attached? And then the other thing is, what money are we not getting to educate our kids? Because they've now, once again, it's the bucket game. You've heard me say it before. They're just going to move money out of one bucket and put it in another to help pay for the SROs, which means they're taking away money. Until our district, if I'm a legislator, until our district says, hey, we're going to move our own buckets of money around and show that we can do away with some things, then I would not support that. I would not say, oh, okay, well, let's just continue to give free money to these school districts that don't want to give up any money.
For effective onboarding and induction support for new teachers, principals, and I have no idea what that means. I think I do. I think I generally get the gist of it. But what that looks like to a legislator, like when I ran for state rep, I met with like Dennis, and I'll never forget this because they asked me about Dennis questions. No idea what they're talking about. You know, because I've never been in the dentist field. I know, you know. And so if there was a table of dentists meeting about the meeting with me, they would say things like, they're really uninformed. Or Mr. Parks doesn't know what we're talking about. And all the same similar conversations we had in here. And so sometimes it just takes a down-to-earth conversation to say, listen, we need to work on some legislation that makes it easier for us to get teachers into the classroom faster.
A down-to-earth conversation. I would agree with him 100%. But that's not what we did at the legislative meeting. We had a moderator. It was not a down-to-earth conversation. And that's because Matt Turner doesn't know how to have those conversations.
Typing the complicated application thing on the website to actually teaching in the school, which is really what it comes down to, right? But there's a lot of cost in that.
Well, I think one of the things that would have been nice that what we did is to have an actual presentation. Because when we do normal workshops, there is a presentation. And honestly, the way it was read, I almost expected a slideshow presentation or something with data, because it's the administration participating in this as well. So I was a little bit like, well, there was no data really given to them. Just some talking points on 3 pages. But we should have given them more meat in the subject matter. And we could still do that in different ways, like investing in early childhood education. That's going to be an uphill battle. We know this. But you want to talk about somebody passionate about it, Dr. Shires. He'll talk to you all day long. And he will explain it to you in different ways if you need him to. But maybe setting up something to where they can go visit him or have the option to go visit him so he can explain, getting them with the people that we can say, let me show you what this looks like, and get them to the right people. Because we're not experts on it, but you know, we can hit the talking points, and you know, and we're not going to talk about it unless we believe in it.
Sure.
So, you know, there's that too. So that's why we have to have buy-in on this, because if you want us to support it, we need to have buy-in on it.
Sure.
But getting them into that place where we can say, okay, you want to talk about early childhood education, let me show you. Let me get you in touch with Dr. Shires. You want to talk about, you know, different career paths, let me get you in touch with Mr. Jones. You know, that sort of thing, so we can get them into the right person. So that might be a good thing for us board members to have, is somebody that would be a good go-to for a lot of these points. So if it's something we might not know much about, or we can actually go to them and say, hey, can you educate me on this so I know what we're talking about here a little bit.
And I think it's the different, like, we have to speak specifically and like give them those things like you're saying, but then we also, these are the people who are actually going to be writing the bills. Right? They need to know, so like these people who we keep saying are uninformed are going to write bills that don't work. Even if they're trying, even if we convince them to do something, they have to write a bill that makes sense and actually solves the problem. So like, you know, Rawlings on the Ed Committee, and like those people need to get the details, like on what is actually going to fix this.
Yeah.
Specific language.
Yes,
I was a little surprised.
Right, like the opponents have people writing bills and giving it to the legislature saying, pass this, right? We need to give them that wording. This is what we want.
I think the early childhood piece, I was really surprised to see them come out so kind of negative at that right away, right? Senator Schickel, as he started talking about raising a family and all that stuff, it kind of made me understand that perspective. But my perspective, and working with workforce development, this has been an issue that comes up a lot. And I know at CBG, one of the biggest things that we have so many jobs, right? And it's impossible to fill a lot of these jobs. They're going around the country to find talent, so they want to have good school system. And one of the things that comes up to attract that talent is, do we have a preschool program? Do we have a kindergarten program for the day? And I think is something that Mr. Rollins and some of the others really need to see. Like, this is not about,
Do they
you know,
understand? I just did some simple math. Let's say across the state. So they're wanting to make preschool a fully funded education system across the state. So let's just say on the low end, 3 to 5 year olds that are in preschool, let's just say across the state, there's 10,000. Now, I think that's probably on the low end. I could be wrong, but I would say that's probably pretty low. At $4,200 a kid, that's what the state would give us. That's $420 million that the state has to come up with. Where does that come from?
Oh, guess what? If you're a corporation and you insist that we provide pre-K so that you can get employees and get better employees who don't have to raise their children, guess what, big old corporation Amazon? Why don't you provide the pre-K?
Right.
Why don't you pay for the pre-K? Why are you leaning into our tax dollars to get pre-K taken care of for your initiative, Chamber of Commerce? Fund it yourself.
Yeah, they don't understand it. It's got to come from somewhere. That just means they're going to raise our taxes. Then we're going to be like, well, we can't get good employees because we've raised our taxes. Can you believe our legislators raised our taxes? Now we can't get employees in Boone County. I mean, why can't we lower our taxes? It's like they want all of these things and don't understand where money just grows on trees. I mean,
Just pennies on the dollar.
pennies on the dollar. I read an article the other day, just the average cost, everyday living, $12,000 more than it was 4 years ago. So you spend, on an average, I think in the state of Kentucky, it's around 9, but nationally it's 12. So you spend $12,000 more everyday living, food, gas, whatever else, than you did 4 years ago. So we're already spending more money. We've raised the prices of all these things. Now we're wanting to raise taxes. So they're going to take more money away from us. I mean, we're heading towards another Great Depression if we're not careful of what we do.
Who's asking for this program? Because it's not an outcry from the community. The community's not asking for that. They've admitted it's the corporations. It's the Chamber of Commerce that wants that. So if they want that, put your money together, people, and start providing that if that's what you want.
Or you pay more taxes. You give the state more money. Let's see how you like that.
Yeah, there you go.
And is it a way to indoctrinate these kids earlier?
Well, I'll tell you what some kindergarten teachers have told me, that full day kindergarten is not a good thing. The kids don't get naps. They're done after lunch, and it's just a disaster after lunch. The teachers don't think we should be doing full day kindergarten, and they have a really hard time with children who aren't potty trained and have issues. They play the role of parent and teacher when you're dealing with those age groups, and it's very draining. And I don't know if you guys know some kindergarten teachers, but they said that kindergarten teachers can do it a couple years and then they got to switch out to something else because it's just so emotionally demanding, because you're basically being a parent. You have to be there to nurture. If there's bathroom issues, they're sick, they're not, at the age where they can handle a lot of those things on their own. So the teacher has to do all that. It's putting a big burden on those teachers.
And we have really good kindergarten teachers. I mean, that's not an easy job. All three of my kids have had the same kindergarten teacher. She's absolutely amazing. My two younger ones that have been through kindergarten come out reading. I mean, my first grader is reading chapter books now, and I really do credit a lot of that towards her kindergarten teacher who worked extra hard. And I've never asked her that question, but you're right. Like, it's a lot on them. And then it gets into the para educators. These kindergarten paras that do a lot of work, they could go make more money at McDonald's. They're the ones who are helping, and literally we pay them nothing.
Well, and they keep talking about a teacher shortage. So you're wanting to expand the fact that you're going to need more teachers?
Doing the right thing for these kids because we have the data that shows when they're in this program, it's a big deal. But this is what the big businesses like your CBG, your airport, that is attracting all these organizations as they go around and they're trying to make promises of what it means to live in Northern Kentucky. That's a big issue for them that people are looking for. You know, so.
Jesse kind of said this about early childhood as a retort to that, and I think you can look at this list and say about all of them. While you're talking about investing, really what you're talking about is saving money. Because if you are providing a child early education, you're saving money down the road because you're not doing everything else that you have to do to catch that child up. If you're investing in teachers appropriately, you're not retraining teachers time and time again. And a lot of these, if you look at them from a money saving standpoint, even though you don't see that initially, you save money every time you retain someone. You save money every time you...
Pause it. This is just driving me crazy. When they talk about spending the money to invest in teachers, to train them properly, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Do they not go to school? I mean, I know they're not required to get a master's degree anymore, but a lot of our teachers have master's degrees. So if there's an issue with teachers not knowing how to do their job, why aren't we turning that back on these universities and demanding that they do a better job? I would be ticked if I was a teacher and I came out and didn't know how to teach. I paid a lot of money to go to school and get my degrees to be a teacher, and they're basically saying that they're not trained adequately and that we need to invest more in training. I'm sorry. I would have conversations with the local universities. Like, you are getting, I don't know how much a degree even costs anymore. You're getting this money, but anybody who's paying for an education, you should be ticked off if you come out with your degree and you can't do what you went to school to do.
No, I agree with that 100%.
That's an issue with the universities. That's not a burden to the taxpayers. Do you see how they switch around whose burden everything is?
Stacey, I mean, that's a great point. The problem is what they're talking about somewhat is they come out and they learn how to teach our kids English and math and history and whatever they specialized in. If it's K through 5 or, or if it's middle school, like you said, they come out and they know all of that. But they get to the state, and guess what? The state wants you to teach X, Y, and Z on top of everything you learned. And so there's that specific training. It's like SEL. They're not teaching SEL in colleges right now. They're not doing that. Why? Because they know in 4 or 5 years, it's not going to be a thing anymore. We're going to have moved on to something different. And that's what the teachers get frustrated at. They do have to continue to learn all these things that the state pushes instead of just teaching their subject.
Oh, you know what? That brings up a really good point. When I sat on the School Curriculum Assessment Accountability Council, it was right when Andy Bashir started his term, and Jason Glass would get on our calls even though he wasn't part of the council, which was really weird. And he's the one who was saying that social emotional learning would be in every classroom, that every teacher would be teaching it, and that it wasn't mandated right now, but that's where it was headed. And there was a math teacher on the council at that time who said, hold up, I'm not in agreement with this. I'm a math teacher. I want to teach math. You guys as a state already have an issue getting math teachers. We don't have enough math teachers. So to place this additional burden on them, to have them teach something they've never been trained to do, it's not in their wheelhouse, they're not experts in this, is a huge mistake. And one of the superintendents who was on the council said, Well, consider it a tool in your toolbox. If you don't want to teach social emotional learning because it's not mandated yet, you can just socially engineer your classroom. That was what was said.
As early as possible. And I thought that was a really good response to that.
But that could be part of like the presentation. Like I almost wonder about them seeing some of those figures, because that's not that difficult to calculate. If we'd have to get some finance brains in that, to show what it would be the cost savings on the community if early childhood was put in place. And you could talk about prison rates, you could talk, there's a significant dollar savings, not just.
Oh my God, our kids are going to grow up and go to prison if they don't go to preschool. Is that what she's saying?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what she's alluding at. I feel bad now, honestly, listening to this, because we've set my 13, 10, and 7-year-old up. They did not go to preschool. And so I'm a little concerned that they might end up like Prison Mike.
We should get statistics on how many homeschool and private school people end up in jail. But it's people who went through public education. They weren't homeschooled or private schooled. We should get statistics on that. That's interesting that she said that. They're doomed for jail in the future if they don't go to our pre-K.
Get used to those bars, Joey.
Those graphs tell a story, and I think that sometimes we need to tell our story, which data talks, especially to people that are, thinking.
Jenny, I actually agree with you there. The problem is your superintendent doesn't. So yeah, it would have been a lot better to have a presentation.
Sometimes you need those very specific, quiet conversations, one-on-one or two-on-one, where you go visit them down in Frankfurt and make that appointment, sit down, and they're very much willing to have a conversation. And they'll drill you, but they'll also listen.
That's what we used to do. I mentioned at our last meeting, we would have teams of people. You don't have to flood their offices. It could be 3 of us that would go down and sit down with Mr. Rawlings or whoever, and just like you just said, have a really polite, normal conversation. And they may ask a lot of tough questions, but be able to provide those answers in a very, non-confrontational type way.
And the next time
building relationships back to
the next time they see you, they know they've seen you somewhere, and it was a positive experience.
Right.
Okay. Can you pause it right there? For people who don't know, that's Kathy Rootman. She does a lot for the district. I actually like Kathy. She's overworked. And then that was Eric McCarter. Both of those two sat under the previous superintendent, Randy Poe, who I've been told was amazing at building relationships. I don't know how true that is. That's just what I've been told. I think they're making very, very valid points right there. The problem is, once again, we talked about this in the podcast before, is that's not who Mr. Turner is. So this should have been happening as soon as the legislators turned over. He should have been doing that. But what did he do instead? He just sat up at the school board meetings and let school board members take shots at our legislators. And he gets mad at people who go to meetings behind his back. He should be mad at those school board members who have, made the gap a lot larger between the legislators and our school district. Because what they're saying, I think, actually works. You're going and building relationships. You're going and trying to get to know who Mary Ann, who Steve, who they really are, understanding what they really believe, instead of just coming up with your own ideas of who they are. And now you have some facts to go behind what you're going to say about them. But that's not what has happened here. So there's a lot of damage control at this point of trying to rebuild those relationships.
Well, and Matthew Turner spends all his time talking and doing circular conversations, word salad, gaslighting. He's not listening and taking in any feedback to make anything better.
100%.
Building part of it, and seeing him out at the fair or wherever. Mm-hmm. And you can have small talk conversation and they will come up to you.
Yes.
We just talked about that in our meeting an hour ago. And
They're literally trying to teach Turner how to make friends.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's a great point.
January, February, and March.
Going down.
Of going down. And we do that every year. It was really great pre-pandemic, and then it's been picking up.
There were 3 of us last year, I
There
think.
were 3 of us the first time last year, 6 the second time, so it's,
Who is this talking, Jacob? Do you know who that is?
Yeah, that's Kelly. Kelly's the president of the union for the teachers. He actually rolls off this year. This is his last year doing it. I've sat on a couple committees with Kelly. He's a good guy. I think he wants what's best for education.
Well, just so you know, he's the one who had the meltdown on the Teaching and Learning Committee about SB 150 creating a landmine and teachers don't want to teach. I mean, he was very emotional about it.
Not to get off on the SB 150, but once again, I sat with Turner 2.5 years ago in his office and told him if he does not stop allowing our teachers to teach some of the things that they're teaching when it comes to gender, and there will be laws that will go into place that will not allow them to teach these things. And that's what happens is, I'll be honest, I don't agree with everything in SB 150. The law is kind of written in a weird way, but that's what happens. All they had to do was stop teaching second graders that they could be any gender. And if you keep that out of education, we don't have SB 150. And
This goes
so
back to the whole relationship thing. If you're not talking to your legislators, this is what happens.
that's right. That's exactly right. I went to a meeting with Max Wise. He was meeting with all the superintendents in Northern Kentucky. They met at Triple Crown Country Club. Superintendents from Carrollton, superintendents from Ludlow, from Kenton County, all the smaller districts in this area, Beechwood, Walton, Verona, all of the superintendents were at this meeting. I was meeting after them with Max about this exact issue. The only superintendent that was not in attendance, Matt Turner, he was not at the meeting, didn't show up.
Wasn't Max the education committee chair?
At the time, you're exactly right. He was the one trying to get, yeah. And that's what he was wanting to figure out was, are we really teaching these things? Is this bill really necessary? It's ridiculous because once again, Matt wasn't in attendance at this meeting.
As well, which is very educational for yourself to do that, beneficial. So.
Well, I'll say the white whale, so to speak, is Seek. One of the big things that I've learned over the last year is how tied in that is with everything we do. Every financial problem we have, Seek is at the root of it. And that's the white whale. If we can figure out how to advocate for that appropriately, because we get screwed on that in Boone County.
And I think they need to have an understanding as local representatives, because this isn't just, this is everybody that owns a house, this is everybody that owns property in Northern Kentucky needs to be concerned with that, right? And again, the SEEK formula was initially intended was the places that were supposed to be property poor were the places that had the most poor, and that is not the case. Right now in Boone County, because of our businesses and our commercial growth, we are property rich, but we haven't, it's not that we have rich people, we have 8,000 people that qualify for free and reduced lunch, and that is more than any other community in Northern Kentucky put together, right? So they have to really understand this formula, because I think that I was a little leery of and never really thought is if you're going to put out races, if you're going to do these things, like you said, they go back in the SEEK formula. So Jay Williams' piece is like, look, the vehicle to do a lot of these things is really hard for us because we could increase SEEK, but then you're ending up with less money, right? So somewhere along the way, there needs to be, the only way it's going to change, at least I would think, and there's other places that want to see changes to that formula, should be they have to lead that fight on behalf of these 8,000 kids that are outliers for that formula, because the formula it made sense. Your property poor areas would be the places that have the most amount of poor, but we are technically property rich, but we have an abundance of people, that qualify.
Jerry, you have some really good points right there with that, with the SEEK formula. I think also that's just considering if the SEEK formula is fully funded.
True.
Which it's not right now, and that is something we can actively go after is to have more funding, because it's really not increased except for the last couple of years where the legislature did bump up the SEEK base. They've not, prior to that, they've not changed it since 2008. There's been no additional money. And so there's the issue with trying to rectify things with the program or with the formula, because you're right about it being inherently different for us and our community. But also, if they fully fund it, then it works much better.
Right.
And it helps much better. We would be in a different situation right now if we funded. Or if they just fully funded parts of it. For example, right now, if they fully funded transportation for
Yeah,
us.
that's what I was gonna say, that's the big front and center topic right
That
now.
would save district funds we've got to then spend to make up that shortfall in transportation. So that could be a game changer, other bumps to it in other areas. So getting them to, I should say, they're not going to be able to solve that problem quickly because there's not enough money to be able to bring it all the way back up at one point in time. Over the years, it's going to take a period of time.
I don't know. Spending $500,000 for an RFID chip program could be an issue with the funding for transportation too, Turner.
I've been writing these down as we go. We want to pay for SROs from the state. We want to pay early childhood education at a minimum of, $420 million, which means we're going to have to hire more teachers, which we can't even hire teachers we need now. We want to invest in our teachers, which that's going to cost money. Kelly talked about that, investing in our teachers. Jesse talked about that. And then we want to fully fund SEEK. We're asking a lot. Do I believe that all of these things could make education better? I mean, yeah, probably so. But at the same time, where is this money coming from? Do they think our state has all of this money? Because the next thing they're going to make sure is that their pension is being fully funded. And so it's like we just constantly ask for more money. They've yet to say where they think they can get all this money. Because they don't want to be the ones to say it, that you're going to have to raise taxes.
So we need a long-term solution for that. Because it is challenging for us. And what that's created is those curves have changed where back in 2008 and prior decade, almost 2 decades, that state funding for public schools was the majority of funding that school districts used, and not local taxes. Now it's been completely reversed. It's a minority of state funding, and the majority of our funding is our local taxpayers. And that's the responsibility of the state to fix that. I mean, because that's part of the whole process that was put into place back in 1990, where education is supposed to be fully funded.
The other thing that we've not talked about is, both of you all are aware of this, but just for everyone to understand, when they talk about SEEK money, what they're saying is SEEK is a difficult formula to understand. So you can go online and try to figure it out. It's difficult. But one thing I do know is that in the last 4 years, our school district has lost students. Well, when you lose students, you lose SEEK money. Why are we losing students? I don't know. Maybe it's an agenda that our state's trying to push. So across statewide, this is not just Boone County. This is across the state. You go to all the districts. Private schools are growing. I talked to the school where I used to be the principal in Louisville. It's a private school. They had 50 people shadow in one day coming from public schools. 50. That's 50 people that are wanting to pay $8,000 a year on top of their taxes, what they're already paying for their education. They're saying the education is so poor in public schools, we're going to pay an extra $8,000 a year per kid. And it's like we forget that. I looked at the numbers just the other day. I mean, we're down in Boone County. I think it's close to 1,000 kids from where we were 4 years ago. Think about that. 1,000 kids. That's a lot of kids.
But all these corporations are bringing in these Cambodian and people from out of the country, and they have children. We may have one child that goes to a private school, but then it's being replaced with a child from one of these corporations like Amazon or something.
And just so you know, Jill, when we bring in a kid like that, that's ESL, English as a second language, we get more money from Seek.
Right.
So that's just adding more. So we're getting less money overall, which means we're losing a lot of our good students. When I say good students, I just mean just get us the $4,200 and no more money.
Well, here's the thing. When I talk to some of these people from the Congo, they're not aware of some of the stuff that's going on in the schools, but they're family people. And they have, a lot of them are Christian, some are Catholic. Their values are not aligning with what our schools are doing. So I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing them pulling their kids out. When they realize what's going on, when I've talked to them about the panorama and social emotional learning and the stuff that they're doing in our schools, they have no idea that that's what's going on. You think it's hard for us to know? Try speaking a different language. I have a feeling when they figure it out, when they find out what's been going on in our schools, it's going to be a different story for them as well.
Yep.
Well, they want factory workers. They don't want leaders.
Thing in terms of a call of urgency in thinking about that is the income tax legislation, where the income tax will be lowered, based on expenses. Like if they, and you guys are, how does that work? Does anybody know how it works? It's because right now I think the highest income bracket is like 4.5 and it's supposed to go down to 4 and continue until it ultimately eliminates, as long as all the expenses are covered. Right. And I think that's the sense of urgency. Like if we don't put these expenses that are needed, that are delayed costs, like you said, since 2008 we haven't had an increase. They're not programmed.
2 years we did. Give credit.
So I think for the
last
2
couple
years, if we don't still have those things, we could lose that money forever, right? Because keeping the tax base the same is one thing, but raising it back up, costs just isn't going to happen, So, and right now, the way our economy's going, we do have, surpluses. It seems like every time you look around, there's more money coming in because of our economy is really doing still pretty well. So, I don't know, I'm just kind of nervous that we get this big surplus and then there's an income tax adjustment.
They're going to say we have enough money now, we can lower the income tax.
Yeah, and we don't have enough, and we're not taking all these, so that's the thing, I guess the takeaway that I have is us as principals and building folks, we really need to push and push hard with the board members, as hard as we did when it came down to the pension issue 5 years ago,
We really could use for the board members, I would say a SEEK workshop that goes into discussing a little bit more, helping us communicate it better, because that's...
Do you know who that man was that was speaking, Jacob?
Yeah, that's the principal at Ignite.
Okay, because he just said the economy is really well. And he said that we have surpluses coming in. And it's funny because the economy is not doing well for the private sector. The private sector is struggling. The cost of everything's gone up. So it's funny that someone who works in the schools is like, no, we're doing great. Surpluses everywhere. Economy is wonderful. That's how delusional these people are, that they don't either have friends and family who work private sector jobs. Because if you ask any private sector person, they're going to tell you no. Even corporations. I have a friend whose husband works for a very large corporation. They have dropped insurance for these employees in corporate. And now they give them a stipend to go purchase their own. I mean, that's how bad it is in the private sector, that corporations are dropping benefits and things for people. But in our buildings of government, they have pensions, they have benefits. Do you know the private sector don't even do pensions anymore? Is saying the economy is good because there's surpluses coming into them?
Stacey, the people that are sitting in that room are making 6 figures. So they are clueless.
They pensions and benefits and it's a burden to the taxpayer. Well, we all struggle. Yep. It's like they have no idea what's going on in the real world.
Sometimes I'll shut down. I can't properly communicate it.
You mean the KSBA workshops aren't helpful? But they're mandatory.
I trust Linda Schill. If you can't learn it from Linda, you can't learn it at all.
Yeah, she's very good at it.
Now, Linda was doing the KSBA workshops.
Anything else? I think we're past our time. We told you we'd be out of here.
Anything else? He's ready to get done with it.
And we talked last time about trying to get the teachers, we used the phrase silent majority, which historically I have a problem with, but the idea works, as getting these teachers engaged. And I would say, one, if you're using this, one, you're gonna lose people by like here, just because people are busy. And that means they're not where we talk about staff raises. And I think if we're asking teachers to be involved and call your legislators, that's going to motivate them more. Make sure that's included in there. And I think last time we talked about like, what are one or two key steps that you can do? Like, what are our main priorities and what are one or two things that we're asking you to do right now? So I would make it like brief and simple for them to
take versions of this.
Yeah.
Some simpler, with less detail.
Do you think it would make more sense to sending it out to the teachers in pieces?
I'm not sure that people are gonna follow along, make the connection every time, like some will.
I think the same message over and over and
Yeah.
over again.
Better.
Yeah.
So not breaking it down, just
Mm-hmm.
keep repeating it.
Or realign
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
If you see as a
So I like how he said to motivate the teachers. I'm going to replace that word with a more accurate word. To me, it sounds like they're figuring out how to manipulate the teachers. That did not sound like motivating them. That sounded like, how are we going to manipulate them to get involved? Well, we're just going to send the message out repeatedly, and we're going to start it off with the teachers' raises. That'll get their buy-in.
The legislative cannot give raises. The state cannot give raises to our district. They can give money that can then tell the district they can use it however they want, but that's ultimately up to the district. But that's why I'm saying it's a manipulation tactic.
Correct.
100%. But I'm like, are the teachers not that smart? I've had teachers say that. Oh, well, Governor Beshear, he's given us all raises. Okay. Well, you understand that the only thing he's doing is giving a bucket of money to the district and allowing them to use it however they want. They don't have to use it on raises. They don't have to use it for that at all. And that's what they don't understand. It's like, goodness gracious, what are these people? Do they not really understand how it works?
Yeah, because they're being manipulated. This is brainwashing. They're not teaching them and educating them on how the system works, who does what. I mean, I noticed that with Andy Beshear's ads of stuff he was claiming that he was going to do and stuff he was going to not have done. And I'm thinking, that's not even your role in government. You can't do any of that, Andy.
Yeah.
All you can do is veto or sign off on. Like, that's all you can do. And then you can do your crazy emergency order crap that you pulled. But he ended up getting sued for all that. So, but I'm just saying, in general, our society's been dumbed down, especially when it comes to civics. I think it's by design. That could be my conspiracy mind. But it's crap like this, where they're designing a process where they're not being transparent and they're not telling the teachers how the process works. They're not even educated on the civics process of this either.
in the first bullet is permanent faculty and staff raises, you're on board.
Yeah.
Okay, because that's me and my colleagues who are in this work, classified, certified, that I want to advocate, I can pick up the phone as a teacher.
Right, and the simple things we talked about, like fully fund the things that are supposed to be funded. Like, those are very simple things to communicate, right? Pay for transportation, pay for SROs.
Well, and we can honestly put invest in public education to the bottom, because everybody knows that that's a no-brainer.
Right.
But I mean, I would honestly take the last three and move them up, and the first two and move them down. Because I would say enhance education profession, then improve efficiency. And then support school safety and resiliency. Then invest in early childhood education, and then invest in public education.
I agree with Darren on the talking points, because if I'm a teacher, I want to know, what does that look like? Is it fully funding SROs? Then I would want to say that. You need to fully fund the SROs so that we're, or however we would, but to be as explicit and as clear as possible, so that we have a united message.
I want the reps to keep hearing the same thing over and over again too.
Mhm.
We don't want it to be disparate.
Message discipline.
Yeah.
Yes, agree.
That MK Ultra, if they hear it over and over and over again.
Brainwashing. Yeah. And if they're hearing the same thing over and over again, and all the reps are saying the same thing, she's talking about the KEA reps. But if the message is synced and it's coming from the state and it's coming from their boss in the school and it's coming from their superintendent and it's coming from their union reps and it's coming from here, it must be true. Just like they did with all the COVID nonsense.
Right.
It must be true. I'm getting all my emails from all of these people that I work with, my colleagues and my union, and
Propaganda.
propaganda.
Yeah, it's you gotta kind of be like clear and simple, especially with some of mine, because they're not gonna get it. What are you laughing for there? They'll tune out. They tune out if they don't see. And I'll tell you, a lot of them tune out when they see teacher. Sure. I mean, I'm constantly getting bombarded with the teach thing. What about us? I'm like, you're all educated. Well, they don't get that. So, I mean, try to keep it a little simple, because it's hard for me to explain it to them, and then I just get frustrated, and some of you know what happens when I get frustrated with people, so.
Could we look at possibly rewording this a little bit? Like, could you all do something, work some magic with that?
Multiple versions of this, so it looks different at times, so that when we're sending information out, we can prioritize some things, but some of the same things are going to be constant to seeing some things. So lots of different forms of this over time, because we're not going to want to send the same document every single time.
Our members will be getting this, but not with these words. These are almost, I mean, our legislative program is larger than this, but all of these are on our legislative program. So they'll be saying the same thing from us, just in different language.
Yeah, we'll have some different materials than some of the things from KASA, a lot of information as well. KASS, the Superintendent's Association, will be doing some of the same work as well.
KSA did put out an email and a text to employees throughout the state to call legislators about the teacher pay raise, the teacher and staff pay raises, to basically say that we need to be out of
I'm saying KSA, ASA, KDE, KFBA, KEA, they're all doing it, just blowing them up.
So that just came out yesterday.
And if you've not read that report, it's a little sobering, because if you see what the states around us are doing with the first-year average teacher salaries, some of them are going to be much higher than ours unless we make some changes. And for us being in the area we are with Indiana and Ohio close by, we already see some of the effects of the pay scale differences between the three states.
Unfortunately, and we're oxymoron on that one is, I think if Cameron had won, they would have been more likely to give us raises, so they could say that they did that. I think they were holding it as a bargaining tool.
Right, I think maybe that was the case, but I think
But I still think it's possible, right? Like,
I do feel
now
like
it's not, now they know that they can't hold it out for 4 more years as a bargaining tool.
I see reasons to be optimistic.
I do too. I know that they are very pro-teacher. I haven't talked to one yet that is not.
I think they do want to get raises. I think they were just holding out.
Yeah.
I do want to say one other thing. Asking people to contact their legislators, we have to, and we've had this problem for years, we have to let our people know that our legislators are people.
Right.
Because oftentimes they think that they're like completely unapproachable. They don't understand that A, they want to hear from you, and B, they're just regular people with a title.
Well, no, it's not only that
Or they think
the
they're
insults. The insults are that's the fun part.
Just make a quick observation. I noticed nobody, including our gentleman with the report over there, did mention the idea of raising board member pay.
All right, not that I would love to have a December meeting. I need to want to talk, do we want to have a December meeting? to get together and talk again, revisit.
I'd say January, like at that time to get the
Can I make
information.
a quick suggestion? If there are bills pre-filed that either go with or against any of these priorities, there needs to be some communication, either email-wise. And if there is something that is, just vastly important, we may need to, and it could be, it doesn't have to be in person, but some communication of some sort if we need to advocate for something or against something maybe, whatever it is. We always keep kind of our eye on that, but if we see something, we'll communicate with you and then you can.
Sure.
Well, I guess Jesse didn't get the memo. They're not pre-filing bills anymore. The House leadership changed the rules. Did you guys know that?
Yeah, I heard that.
I'd heard that.
Okay. Yeah, there is no pre-file bills, so that we don't have time to review them before they get siphoned through the leadership into committees and they start doing the work. So I guess he didn't get that memo.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap.
A lot of good comments that were made or directed towards Turner. I'm not quite sure he cares or even listens.
Okay, our time's up. You're giving me constructive feedback. It's over.
Yeah. Thank you all, but I got to go.
So
my God.
what is the community? What is their takeaway? What's the call to action here?
We just have to get more people educated on this stuff. And I mean, once again, I was in the same boat most parents were in. I was not involved. I made that comment to someone yesterday. For a while, I don't think we had to be involved because I think we lived in a conservative community, which I still think we live in. And I think we had a superintendent that, for the most part, didn't care what the state was pushing. Now, towards the end of his tenure, I think he did. I mean, he's the one who started with social emotional learning. He's the one who got that ball going. Well, why? He had dreams of eventually moving on to the position he's in now. So what did he need to do? He needed to jump on board with some of what the state was doing. So that's what he did. Anyways, I just think we have to educate our people in the community of exactly what's going on. Not everyone's going to care, and I get that. But at the same time, I know who will care are the grandparents that are in the community.
Well, and I heard that there is going to be a bill proposed that tax dollars are not allowed to be used for lobbying. And might I suggest that everybody call their legislators and demand that one go through?
Because if that's the case, then what they're talking about sending out to teachers couldn't happen.
Well, I just wonder if teachers are waking up to the scam of what they're doing, especially after all the COVID nonsense. I wonder if at some point the teachers are like, I'm not even going to read these emails. You've got me doing all kinds of data input into these dashboards. I'm trying to teach these kids, like, you guys gaslit us on the masks, the vaccines. I've talked to teachers and a lot of them are on to the nonsense at this point. So I wonder if they're even going to open these emails or even care that these are being sent out to them anymore, if they get that it's all propaganda. I don't know.
And I think they're only sent out to the teachers that are in the union.
Well, it comes from the superintendent himself. It comes from the principal. That's what they were talking about in this panel. How do we get this out? And Turner even said he would come into the schools. And Carolyn said it went out to all staff. Well, and in Oldham County, they not only sent it out to the whole staff, they sent it out to the parents.
In summary, the Legislative Committee of Boone County Schools is lobbying for legislation on our dime, and principals are rolling out this message on Matt Turner's behalf. So number one, teachers, be aware of the propaganda and gaslighting coming your way, and use your discernment. Research on your own. And number two, community, reach out to your legislators and board members regarding A, your thoughts on the legislative initiative, B, Boone County School District wasting tax dollars to push special interest groups' legislative agenda, and C, any other concerns you may have involving our public school system. People, you're going to have to get involved in order to make a change.
You're welcome.